On my drive into Peppermill on a Friday afternoon, I started thinking about two different men who have dedicated their lives to being poker pros. One is a Las Vegas pro named Hank who once lived in Reno and came up here to play 1025 No Limit recently, and allegedly won a $50,000 pot in that game. I'll be honest, I couldn't help but be a bit jealous, not so much about the money, but about the certainty that winning that pot likely gave him about his decision to play poker full-time. Because at that point, there's no way that he was saying to himself, I really wish I'd been a lawyer. It's that certainty that I must admit I've always lacked. Wondering about what my life would be like if I tried out being a full-time pro is something that I have now spent several years doing. And I'll be honest, I get a lot of reporter assignments that make me really wish I had chosen it. Now, it's been established that the only players in town better than me are the full-time pros. And I can't help but wonder how I would compare if I had gone full-time myself. Could I be as good as Hank if I had quit work years ago and be dragging a $50,000 pot myself? It's a question that I'll never know the answer to. But I also couldn't help but think of another pro, one by the name of Robert Stan, a.k.a. Rob Farha, who hosts the Grind podcast, who recently said that he'd pretty much rather be doing anything most of the time than playing poker. This guy is not even 30 yet, and he gets paid to talk about poker and still seems to want out. So when I get stuck out in the cold doing live weather hits on a Tuesday night and find myself thinking that, being at a poker table wouldn't be all that bad, it's that second guy that I try to think about. As brutal as the recent downswing was, I never deviated from my $1,000 buy-in at these 3-5 games, so I did that for this session. The first hand I played came when we got a couple of limps, and I picked up ace-queen of clubs in the big blind. I raised to 25, one limper, and the cutoff makes the call. So with 55 in, it comes ace-queen-deuce with two hearts, giving me top two. I generally like to fast play in these spots, especially as the pre-flop raiser, but I don't want to bet too much either, so I just bet another 25. He basically ends up snap calling me, which appeared to be a good sign, so with 105 in, the turn comes an offsuit 8. I bet 60, thinking that if he was chasing hearts, he would continue to chase, and if he had a pretty good size ace, he would continue to call. But he ends up laying it down. My thought that his speedy call on the flop was a sign of strength ended up proving to be incorrect. Next hand comes in the hijack, raises to 15, and the cutoff calls. The button folds, and I'm in the small blind with pocket deuces. I look to set mine here, so with 45 in, my mining operation strikes gold as we get a queen 7 deuce rainbow flop. I check. The hijack bets 20, and the cutoff calls him. I could slow play on a rainbow board here, but I think check raising right now is the better play, so no action killers end up showing up. I make it 60, looking to keep king-queen in there. The hijack calls pretty quickly, and the cutoff goes out. So with 165 in, the turn is a jack. I bet 80, and the hijack calls. So with 325 in, the river is another jack, giving me the smallest of boats. I bet 125, still thinking that king-queen was probably the most likely hand he would have here. He thinks about it for a minute before finally jamming all in for about 300. Obviously a snap call for me. He shows jack 10 of hearts for trip jacks. So he called with a backdoor straight and flush draw, which wouldn't be enough for me to call a check raise, but I kind of get the idea. And he ends up going runner-runner trips, Not enough for him, though, as we take down a pot of about 900. The next hand comes when I'm under the gun with Jack-10 of spades and open to 15. The button calls, as does the small blind. So with 45 in, the flop comes 7 of spades, 4 of spades, 8 of diamonds, giving me straight and flush draws. I bet 30, and the button min raises to 60. The odd part here was that the big blind ended up cold calling that raise, so my initial thought of semi-bluff re-raising here kind of went out the window. So I call, and with 225 in the pot, the turn comes the ace of clubs. It gets checked to the button, and he somewhat surprisingly checks it back. So we go to a river, which comes to 7 of hearts, so I brick all my draws. And I was wondering if I might be able to get away with a bluff here if the big blind checks, but he doesn't. In fact, he ships all in for $600. And this is a guy who's kind of a spot in the game. He, of course, gets 2 quick folds here, but I'm not sure if that's what he wanted or not. And I obviously had no other option but to fold. Made me wonder what would have happened had I hit one of my draws. Next hand comes when under the gun 1 opens to 15 and plus 2 calls. I'm in the cutoff with jacks, and I raise to 60. I then start rolling film on the hand as both players call me. So with 180 in, the flop comes 7-5 deuce rainbow. It gets checked to me, and I bet about half the pot, sliding in 90. Plus 1 calls, and plus 2 folds. So with 360 in, the turn is a very interesting card. It comes a jack. Plus 1 checks. Now, if we were both deep here, I would have to ponder bet sizing, but he only has 125 behind, so it's an easy shove all in. He snap calls and ends up having pocket 5s for a flopped set. So his slow play blows up on him. Had he jammed the flop, I would have considered folding. I'm not sure that I could have. It would have been a tough decision. But we take down a nice pot there, set over set. Later on, an unknown OMC raises to 15 under the gun, and it folds all the way around to me in the small blind with ace-3 of spades, and I call. The big blind calls as well, so with 45 in, it comes ace-5-3, all clubs, giving me top and bottom pair. I decide to just lead right out into this guy, betting 30. The big blind folds, and under the gun stacks chips around for about 30 seconds, but only ends up putting in a call. So with 105 in, the turn comes another 3, giving me a boat. I decide just to keep betting, thinking that he probably has a hand like ace-queen, as ace-king likely raises the flop. I bet 75, and he says something like, well, what the hell?
What the hell?
And calls. You gotta watch out for those kind of comments sometimes, because they can often be Hollywood. But obviously in this case, I kind of want it to be. So with 255 in, the river comes a brick, and I bet 150. He kind of hems and haws and says that he'll pay me off, and he calls.
I'll pay you off.
With pocket 10s with the 10 of clubs, a much lighter call than I would have ever expected, given how tight that he'd basically played all day. But it looked like he just kind of wanted to get out of there, and we take down a $555 pot. An OMC opens to 20 under the gun, and another OMC calls in the cutoff. I look down at 8-9 of clubs in the big blind and make the call. So with 60 in, it comes 4-4-7 with 2 clubs. I check, and the initial raiser bets 25. And the other OMC calls him. Now this is a guy who does not play many hands, so when he does, he's not likely to fold them. So I ruled out semi-bluffing here for that reason. I make the call, and the turn is the 10 of clubs, giving me a flush. I bet right out for 60, and under the gun quickly folds. The cutoff, though, makes the call. And we're heads up to a river that comes an offsuit 3. Now I think I have a pretty easy value bet here, though I'm going to have a tough time figuring out what to do if I get raised. Still, I throw in 1 black chip, and he barely thinks about it at all and raises me 220 more. Now, I know this opponent very well. He will occasionally overplay hands in weird ways. So for that reason, I thought about it. Like, it's possible he could just be slow playing pocket aces here and decide to raise now. He's done weird crap like that before, but in this case, I felt that that was a little too ambitious of a thought. And I thought that he's probably normally going to have me beat. So I opt for the fold. Not sure it was right. He later went on to tell me that he had the nut flush. Of course, he could have been lying. Unfortunately, I went on to flop big draws 2 more times after that and lost both of those hands. So I gave back some of the money that I'd won, but still win more than a hockey puck.
I would equate it to what Dan Harrington's book did for poker guys.
All right, heading out of the Peppermill, listening to the Poker News podcast as our boy Chad Holloway is getting a chance to fill in on it as Sarah Herring is on maternity leave. So good to see Chad get that opportunity there with them. So I know I mentioned I won a little bit more than a hockey puck, ended up being an $1,179 win. So obviously I ran really good throughout the majority of the day, ran pretty bad at the end, and a couple big draws to result in it not being closer to a $2,000 win, but I will certainly take it. Amazingly enough, that is my 10th consecutive winning day, and that comes after a brutal downswing of over $8,000. One of the worst I've ever had, probably the single worst downswing I've ever had in terms of just how bad I ran over a month-long stretch. Definitely not the most emotionally devastating one, though. That would have come back in 2012 when I was obviously a much worse player and had a lot less money. But overcoming those downswings, if you're good at it, it's one of the best traits you can have as a poker player. That's for sure. And I'm not saying I'm the best, but I'm certainly better than I used to be. And hopefully I've been able to overcome this one, and we'll trend back up throughout the next several months, because as I've told a couple of people, it'll take months to recover from a downswing like that. But that is what it is. So anyway, good to be back on the winning track there. And I am going to head to work for the weekend and jump back into it next week. I am here at the Atlantis at the moment, not to play poker. One of my longtime friends visiting from Chicago. He was actually the guy that I started playing poker with back in 2008. My man.
How you doing?
Mike Cantrell joining the vlog, my best buddies, all the way back to the 90s. Now, I want you to tell the audience, what did I tell you about the importance of, when it comes to winning at poker, what's important?
Well, I guess the best way that you put it was, it wasn't necessarily the hard work and the grind or anything else of being smarter. It was just playing with people that are dumber than you. Pretty much.
That's all you need to know. If anyone ever asked you,
Secret of life.
how do you win at poker, just tell them that. Now, what year did you and me first start playing? Because you were the first guy that I ever played with. I mean, this was like 2008, wasn't it? I mean, I think it was 2008. Maybe it was before that. I'm not sure.
Oh, I have no idea.
But I think it was you and me going to the Grand Sierra Resort, jumping in a 1-2 game.
That's right.
That was the first time that I ever played. And I think I booked a win in that damn game. I think.
You did.
I think I booked a win.
It wasn't much.
It wasn't much. No, we hit and ran.
Yeah,
we got in there and hit and ran a 1-2 game in 2008.
Yeah, I lost 80. I know that.
Did you?
Yeah.
And didn't we like go play blackjack after that? It's probably the last time I ever did that in my life.
I had $20 left, and I went and played blackjack.
Put it on the blackjack table. That's how it is.
And I went up and then lost it all. So there you go.
And now, 11 years later, you've been on a poker vlog seen by thousands. Who would have seen that coming? All right, wrapping it up on this edition of the vlog. My thanks to those of you, by the way, that chimed in after the announcement I made at the end of the last vlog. Got a lot of cool comments on that, so I appreciate that. I also appreciate one Jimmy G and the 49ers. Absolutely one of the most amazing games. I'm recording this on a Sunday night. They beat the Saints, that 48-46 game. Maybe the most amazing regular season game the 49ers have ever been involved in. And they're on track now to be the number 1 seed.
Okay,
I'm
Ben,
liking that.
but that's all cool. But what about those Rangers?
Jordan wants to point out that my Golden Knights lost 5-0 to her New York Rangers today as well. I'm not acknowledging that game. I'm focusing on the 49er game. Don't you realize that?
Willful ignorance.
Are you saying I'm ignorant?
Yes. Basically.
I don't appreciate
Like,
that.
comment down below if you think Ben is ignorant.
Not good?
I think you're a little crazy. We'll see you next time.